The definitive sound of Agent Alex Vance's career imploding wasn't a bang, but a wet, sticky squelch. It was followed by the collective groan of 17 highly trained S.H.I.E.L.D. tactical agents as they were simultaneously encased in a rapidly expanding, peppermint-scented containment foam. The foam, a proprietary non-Newtonian polymer Alex himself had calibrated, was supposed to create a precise, targeted barrier. It was supposed to halt the advance of the mock assassins in this final, crucial field exercise. Instead, a single misplaced decimal point in his ambient humidity compensation algorithm had turned a $100 million training facility into something resembling the inside of a giant, sticky candy cane. Now, standing at rigid, humiliating attention in Deputy Director Maria Hill's office, the phantom scent of mint still clinging to his nostrils, Alex wished for the sweet release of a memory wipe. Hill's office was a monument to minimalist efficiency, all brushed steel and smoked glass, overlooking the roaring turbines of the helicarrier's engine room. It was a space designed for decisive action and zero sentimentality. Alex felt as out of place as a floppy disk in a supercomputer. "Vance," Hill began, her voice as sharp and cold as the view. She didn't look up from the tablet in her hand, scrolling through the after-action report. The silence stretched, each second a tiny hammer blow to his already shattered confidence. "Top of your class at the Academy of Science and Technology. You revolutionized our data encryption protocols before you were old enough to legally buy a beer. Your predictive threat analysis models have an accuracy rating of 94.6. In simulation, you are, without a doubt, one of our most valuable minds." Alex allowed himself a flicker of hope. "Thank you, ma'am." She finally looked up, and her gaze was a physical force that pinned him to the floor. "In the field, however, you are a liability wrapped in a catastrophe." The peppermint fiasco, as Agent Coulson has so helpfully dubbed it, was the third and final data point in a very clear trend. Operation Silent Ghost. You short-circuited the entire tri-state power grid, trying to deploy a microdrone. Operation Iron Fist. You managed to lock yourself inside the panic room you were supposed to be securing. Each word was a perfectly aimed dart. Alex's face burned. The parameters of the panic room's voice-activated security system were ambiguous, ma'am. You told it to open up, Vance. It's a multi-million-dollar titanium vault, not a therapist. She tossed the tablet onto her desk with a sharp clatter. The point is, your practical application score is not just 0. It's a negative integer. You actively make situations worse. We can't afford that. This was it. The end. He'd be relegated to a windowless basement somewhere, recalibrating printers for the rest of his life. The dream of leading his own RD department, of seeing his designs save lives, dissolved into a puddle of peppermint-scented failure. "So, I'm being discharged?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "No," Hill said, and the word hung in the air, unexpected. Director Fury believes in second chances. Or, more accurately, he believes in leveraging assets until they break or become useful. You, Agent Vance, are getting one last chance to become useful. She slid a thick, beige folder across the desk. It was bound with string, looking ridiculously archaic next to the holographic displays shimmering around them. There was no S.H.I.E.L.D. insignia, no clearance level markings. Just a single embossed symbol, a serpent coiled around a staff. "You're being reassigned," Hill continued. "Effective immediately. Asset Management. UK Division, Special Projects." Alex's heart sank. Asset management was the agency's politest term for glorified babysitting. It was the dead-end posting for washed-up field agents and pencil pushers who couldn't cut it. Special Projects was just the insult added to the injury, a euphemism for assignments so strange or so secret that no one else wanted them. "With all due respect, ma'am," Alex protested, his voice regaining a little strength. "My skills are in technology and data. I could be of much greater use in the labs. Your skills just turned our top tactical team into human statues for 6 hours." Hill cut in, her patience wearing thin. "This is not a negotiation. The posting is unique. It operates under a different set of physical and environmental laws. Ones that our traditional technology has difficulty interfacing with." "Different laws?" He was being sent to another dimension? Alex's mind raced through 1,000 sci-fi scenarios. Asgardian? Kree? Subatomic? Hill's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. Let's just call it analog. Your new station chief will brief you. You'll be overseeing a deep cover operative on a long-term infiltration mission. Your job is to be her handler. Provide support, run communications, and ensure mission parameters are met. Do not, under any circumstances, get involved in field operations. You are her lifeline, not her backup. Understood. Understood, ma'am, Alex said, the words tasting like ash. He was a tech genius, a man who spoke in code and schematics, and they were sending him to a tech-dead zone to babysit an agent. It was a punishment, plain and simple. Your transport leaves in 1 hour. Pack light. Your standard issue gear won't do you much good where you're going. The transport wasn't a Quinjet. It wasn't even a helicopter. It was a rattling black London taxi that smelled faintly of damp wool and exhaust fumes. The driver, a silent man with a scar that split his left eyebrow, navigated the rain-slicked streets with terrifying precision before pulling up to a pub that looked like it had been propped up by its neighbors for the last century. The sign above the door, swinging in the wind, read, "The Gilded Griffin." "End of the line, mate," the driver grunted. "In you go. Ask for a pint of the usual." Feeling utterly ridiculous, Alex pushed open the heavy oak door. The pub was a cacophony of noise and smells. Ale, sawdust, and roasting meat. He navigated through a crowd of burly men in tweed jackets to the bar, where a red-faced man was polishing a glass. "I'll have a pint of the usual," Alex said, feeling like an idiot. The bartender didn't even blink. He grunted, wiped his hands on a grimy rag, and gestured to a door at the back marked, "Cellar." The door opened not onto a set of stairs, but into a small, cramped lift made of dark, scuffed wood and tarnished brass. As the door closed, plunging him into darkness, the lift didn't go down. It lurched sideways with a groan of protesting metal, a gut-wrenching motion that felt entirely wrong. For 10 disorienting seconds, he was thrown against the walls as the world seemed to twist around him. When the lift shuddered to a halt and the doors opened, the damp air of London was gone. He stepped out into what looked like a quaint, impossibly charming village square. Crooked, snow-dusted gables leaned against each other under a sky the color of slate. The air was crisp and smelled of wood smoke and something sweet, like baking gingerbread. Strange, pointed hats dotted the crowd of people milling about. An owl swooped low overhead. A small package clutched in its talons and landed on the shoulder of a passing wizard. Alex's state-of-the-art S.H.I.E.L.D. chronometer, a device that could interface with any satellite network in the world, flickered and died. The screen went blank. "Welcome to Hogsmeade, Agent," a gruff voice said from his left. Leaning against the wall of what appeared to be a junk shop was a man who looked as weathered as the village itself. He was old, with a wiry frame, a face like a crumpled map, and shrewd, intelligent eyes under a mess of gray hair. He wore a long, patched-up coat that might have been fashionable 100 years ago. "Alistair Croft," the man said, not offering a hand. "Station chief, such as it is." "Alex Vance," Alex replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He held up his dead watch. "Is there some kind of localized EMP field in effect?" Croft let out a dry, rasping laugh. "EMP? You lab rats and your fancy acronyms." "No, lad. It's magic. Tends to make your sort of jiggery-pokery go on the fritz. The more complex the machine, the more spectacularly it fails. Your watch is a paperweight now. Your communicator is a brick. Get used to it." He gestured for Alex to follow him into the shop. The sign above the door read, "Croft's Curios Tinkering." The inside was a chaotic wonderland of clutter. Old clocks ticked out of sync, dusty globes spun on their own, and strange brass instruments sat next to stacks of what looked like Muggle VCRs. It was a bizarre fusion of two worlds. "This is the S.H.I.E.L.D. outpost?" Alex asked, incredulous. He'd expected clean lines, hidden tech, a sterile environment. This was a hoarder's paradise. "Best hiding place is in plain sight," Croft grunted, navigating a path through the junk. "The local magicals think I'm just an eccentric old codger who tinkers with Muggle artifacts. They leave me well enough alone. And S.H.I.E.L.D. sends me their brightest and best." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. He eyed Alex's immaculate tactical suit. "Or, in your case, whatever they have left. He led Alex to a small, slightly cleaner room in the back. A fireplace crackled merrily, and a large, detailed map of a sprawling castle dominated one wall. The map was alive. Tiny, named dots of light moved along its corridors. So, Alex said, getting down to business. The asset. Who is she? What's her cover? I've read the mission file on the arcane hand and this. Ethereum compass. High stakes. We'll need a secure comms channel, regular dead drops, and exfil plan. He was in his element now, planning, organizing. This he could do. Croft just watched him, a smirk playing on his lips. You really are fresh off the boat, aren't you? There are no comms channels. Dead drops are done by outpost, if you're lucky. And the only exfil plan is not getting yourself killed. Your job, Vance, is to listen to the asset, give her the Muggle world intelligence she needs, and stay out of her way. Right. Of course. Well, when can I meet her? I need to establish a handler-operative relationship. Build trust. She's already here. Croft nodded toward an armchair by the fire. It's back to them. Alex hadn't even noticed someone was sitting there. He'd assumed it was just another pile of coats. He moved around the chair, ready to give his most professional, reassuring Agent Vance greeting. The person in the chair was a girl. An 11-year-old girl with a cascade of bushy brown hair, wearing a simple gray jumper and skirt. She was utterly engrossed in a thick leather-bound book, her brow furrowed in concentration. Alex stared. He looked at Croft, then back at the girl. This had to be a joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. Very funny. Where's the real agent? The girl didn't look up from her book. Her voice, when she spoke, was crisp, clear, and carried an unnerving amount of authority. He's standing right in front of me, apparently. Agent Alex Vance. S.H.I.E.L.D. Tech Division, top of his class. Field aptitude score, -12. Your performance in the Peppermint fiasco was a statistical anomaly of failure. A 98.7 deviation from projected success metrics. It's a pleasure. She finally closed the book, marking her page with a finger, and turned to face him. Her brown eyes were sharp, analytical, and held a frightening intelligence that did not belong on a child's face. She was sizing him up, dissecting him, and he had the distinct feeling she'd already found him wanting. This was his deep cover operative. This child. My name is Hermione Granger, she said, her expression perfectly neutral. But for the duration of this mission, you will refer to me by my designation, Asset Serpent. Alex's jaw worked, but no sound came out. He was a laughingstock. Sent to the magical boonies to babysit a little girl who talked like a S.H.I.E.L.D. mission report. This wasn't a last chance. It was a professional execution. You're the daughter of Agent Romanoff, aren't you? Alex finally managed, the pieces clicking into place. The cold analysis, the preternatural composure. It was Black Widow's signature style. He'd read the classified addendum. Natasha Romanoff had a child, hidden away, trained from birth. He just never imagined this. Hermione's expression tightened infinitesimally. My mother's identity is irrelevant to the mission parameters. We have work to do. She stood up, walking over to the magical map on the wall. She was small, but she commanded the room. This is Hogwarts Castle. It's the most secure magical location in Great Britain. It's also where the Ethereum compass is hidden. She pointed to a section of the map labeled Third Floor Corridor, out of bounds. Intelligence provided by my mother suggests the compass is being temporarily stored here under a series of magical protections. The headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, believes he is protecting it from a known dark wizard. He's unaware that a third party, the arcane hand, is the primary threat. Alex was still reeling. And your cover is a new student? My cover is that I am a Muggle-born first-year student, exceptionally bright but socially awkward. It's not much of a stretch, she said, a flicker of something melancholy, irritation, in her eyes. It grants me almost unrestricted access to the castle. Lord Malachar and the Arcane Hand believe the compass is a key to unlocking dormant magical nexuses around the globe. They intend to merge that raw magical power with stolen Muggle technology, Stark Industries' arc reactor designs, PIM particle research. They want to force the magical world out of hiding and establish a new global order. She spoke with the detached clarity of an agent briefing her superior, completely inverting their supposed roles. Alex, the handler, just stood there, dumbfounded, as this 11-year-old laid out a plot that threatened to plunge the entire planet into a new kind of war. My objective, Hermione continued, turning back to him, is to retrieve the compass before the arcane hand can. I will handle the magical obstacles. Your job, Agent Vance, is to be my eyes and ears in the non-magical world. You will analyze their tech, predict their movements based on Muggle supply chains, and provide logistical support. You are my mission controller. She walked over to a large, black school trunk sitting by the door and patted it. Most of my specialized gear is already packed. Non-detection charms, customized magical foci, the basics. She looked him up and down one last time, her gaze lingering on his useless watch. The Hogwarts Express leaves from platform 9 3/4 in precisely 47 minutes, she stated, as if discussing the weather. My mother said you were brilliant, but breakable. Try not to break. With that, she lifted the heavy trunk with a surprising lack of effort and headed for the door, leaving Alex Vance standing in the middle of a dusty junk shop in a magical village he didn't know existed an hour ago. His career wasn't just on the line. It was tied to the success of a child super spy on a mission to stop a technomagical terrorist cult. Croft let out another dry chuckle from the corner. Well, are you going to stand there looking like a stunned measle, or are you going to do your job? Alex stared at the empty doorway, the scent of wood smoke and gingerbread mixing with the bitter taste of his own inadequacy. He was in a world that broke his technology, partnered with an asset who thought he was a liability, on a mission that made no sense. And the train was leaving. Right, Alex breathed, shaking himself into motion. Right. Mission controller. He grabbed his useless bag of useless S.H.I.E.L.D. gear and hurried after her, the chilling realization dawning on him that for the first time in his life, he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. Chapter 2. Glitches and Gryffindors. The journey to Hogwarts was, in Alex Vance's professional opinion, a logistical nightmare. Platform 9 3/4 was a security breach waiting to happen, a blatant tear in the fabric of observable reality, hidden behind a brick wall that registered on his seismic scanner as nothing more than solid, load-bearing masonry. The train itself, the so-called Hogwarts Express, was an antique, a crimson and black behemoth that bled steam and whistled with all the subtlety of a klaxon alarm. It smelled of coal smoke, teenage angst, and something vaguely like boiled sweets. Alex sat stiffly in a compartment, his standard-issue S.H.I.E.L.D. field suit, a charcoal gray, multi-pocketed affair designed for urban operations, feeling conspicuously drab amidst the flurry of black robes and pointed hats. He'd already had to explain to 3 different children that no, he was not a cursebreaker on holiday, and yes, his briefcase was locked for a reason. His primary concern, however, was his tech. His state-of-the-art chronometer, a digital watch synced to an atomic clock in a bunker under Ohio, was currently displaying the time as, therefore, in flickering, nonsensical symbols. His short-range comms unit, a sleek earpiece designed to be undetectable, hissed with a sound like frying bacon. He was flying blind, a feeling akin to having his arms and legs systematically removed. The compartment door slid open, and Hermione Granger entered, dragging a trunk that looked heavy enough to anchor a small ship. She had already changed into her school robes, a miniature academic in a sea of adolescent chaos. She didn't acknowledge him, her focus entirely on her cover story. Has anyone seen a toad? She asked the car at large, her voice pitched with just the right amount of manufactured anxiety. A boy named Neville's lost one. Alex cleared his throat. Asset, he muttered under his breath. We need to establish a baseline protocol. Hermione glanced at him, her eyes flicking down to his malfunctioning watch and back up, a universe of condescension packed into the microsecond gesture. The protocol is to blend in, Professor, she whispered back, using his designated cover title with a healthy dose of sarcasm. Which you are failing at spectacularly. You look like you're about to audit the train's tax returns. Before Alex could formulate a retort about the importance of operational readiness, she was gone, striding down the corridor with the purposeful air of a field marshal, not a girl looking for an amphibian. Alex sighed, sinking back into the worn velvet seat. He'd run simulations of this mission for weeks. In every one, he'd maintained perfect satellite uplinks, drone surveillance, and remote-controlled gadgets that could bypass any lock known to man. None of his models had accounted for an environment that actively, maliciously hated technology. Hogwarts was worse. Much, much worse. As Alex stood in the Great Hall, a place he'd only seen on grainy surveillance photos captured by long-range S.H.I.E.L.D. magiscopes, the sheer chaotic energy of the place assaulted his senses. The ceiling wasn't a ceiling. It was a swirling starscape that his optical sensors failed to resolve, flagging it as a catastrophic data error. Hundreds of floating candles drifted lazily overhead, a flagrant violation of every fire code ever written. His S.H.I.E.L.D. issued datapad, his lifeline, was now a warm, inert slab of plastic and silicon in his briefcase. He tried to boot it up 3 times. The first time, the screen filled with dancing cartoon hippos. The second, it sang a jaunty sea shanty in a language he didn't recognize. The third time, it went dark and refused to respond. The castle's ambient magic was like a non-stop electromagnetic pulse, and he was the only one who seemed to notice or care. He watched from the staff table, where he'd been seated next to a twitchy man with a turban that smelled faintly of garlic, as the first-year students were called up to a rickety stool. On it sat a frayed, sentient hat that, according to the mission brief, would read their minds and assign them to a schoolhouse. Alex mentally classified it as a Class 4 telepathic artifact and made a note to recommend its immediate containment and study, before remembering his notepad was now a brick. Granger, Hermione. The call echoed through the hall. He watched his asset walk to the stool. She projected an image of nervous excitement, but Alex saw the truth in her posture, the balanced stance, the way her eyes scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. The hat was on her head for less than a minute before it bellowed. Gryffindor. Alex felt a prickle of annoyance. Gryffindor. Of course. The house of reckless heroes and glory hounds. His psychological profile had suggested she'd be a perfect fit for Ravenclaw, analytical, intelligent, mission-oriented. It seemed even the Black Widow's daughter wasn't immune to a flair for the dramatic. Later, as students swarmed their house tables and a feast materialized out of thin air, a feat of matter transmutation that made Alex's head ache, Albus Dumbledore approached him. The headmaster's eyes, magnified by half-moon spectacles, twinkled with an unnerving amount of insight. Mr. Vance, Dumbledore said, his voice calm and melodic. Our new consultant in Muggle studies. A fascinating field. Tell me, what do you make of the AERO plane? He pronounced the word slowly, as if it were a delicate, foreign concept. Alex, ever the analyst, fell back on what he knew. It's a fixed-wing aircraft that generates lift via an airfoil, propelled by jet engines or propellers, he recited automatically. A cornerstone of modern transport and, regrettably, warfare. Dumbledore stroked his long, silver beard. Indeed. We have brooms, you see. Far less noisy. But I suspect they lack the capacity for in-flight beverage service. He smiled, a grandfatherly expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. I trust you will find our humble castle accommodating. Though I must warn you, some of your more electric curiosities may find the air here disagreeable. It was a polite, wizardly way of saying, I know who you are, and your toys don't work here. The old man was a variable Alex couldn't quantify, and it terrified him. Their first clandestine meeting took place 2 nights later in a disused astronomy classroom. The air was cold, smelling of dust and old parchment. Moonlight streamed through a large, circular window, illuminating a brass telescope the size of a cannon. Hermione was already there, leaning against the window frame, a small, determined silhouette against the Scottish night. Report, Alex said, his voice clipped and formal. He was trying to re-establish the proper handler-asset dynamic. The target is located where intel suggested, Hermione began, ignoring his tone. The Ethereum compass isn't an object on its own. It's bound within the cover of a book titled Cosmological Cartography of the Unseen Realms. It's in the restricted section of the library. Excellent. I'll access the castle's blueprints from the S.H.I.E.L.D. archives via a hardline connection I've established with Croft's outpost, and... You can't, she interrupted flatly. There are no hard lines. There are no blueprints, not ones a muggle could read anyway. The castle shifts. Corridors appear and disappear. Your schematics are useless. Alex's jaw tightened. Fine. We'll go with plan B. I have a microdrone that can slip through the library's ventilation system. Its optical sensors can map the layout and identify magical wards, which I can then analyze and— It won't work, she said, her voice laced with the weariness of someone explaining gravity to a toddler. The drone's rotors will freeze midair and it will drop like a stone. The sensor will broadcast static. Any magical wards will likely perceive it as a hostile entity and incinerate it. Your tech is a liability here, Alex. It's just fancy paperweights. He hated the way she said his name. Not like a subordinate, but like an exasperated older sister. So what is your plan, S.H.I.E.L.D. Granger? He asked, the words sharp. To just walk in and ask the librarian nicely? Almost, she said, a faint smirk playing on her lips. I've already done the reconnaissance. The librarian, Madame Pants, makes her rounds at 11. The restricted section is sealed by a simple locking charm and a low-level detection ward that alerts her to unauthorized entry. I can bypass the lock with an Alohomora charm. The ward, however, is trickier. It's keyed to a student's magical signature. It's designed to keep people like me out. Alex felt a surge of hope. This was a problem he could understand. A signature-based security system. I can build a frequency spoofer, he began, his mind racing. If I can get a sample of the ward's energy output, I can create a device that mimics an authorized signature. All I need is my portable spectrum analyzer and a power source that won't. Or Hermione cut in, holding up a small, empty glass vial. I could just get a hair from one of the professors. A simple polyjuice potion would grant me their appearance and magical signature for an hour. Far more effective. She tucked the vial away. I've already acquired a hair from Professor Flitwick's robe this afternoon. He's quite short. It was easy. Alex stared at her, dumbfounded. While he was trying to re-engineer Cold War technology to fight medieval magic, this 11-year-old had resorted to simple, effective, and deeply unsettling espionage. Plucking a hair from a teacher for a magical identity theft potion was straight out of a Black Widow playbook. That's highly irregular, he finally managed. Welcome to the field, she shot back. Things are messy. Now here's the plan. I'll take the potion and retrieve the book. You will be my lookout. You don't use magic, you don't touch anything, and you don't bring any of your buzzing, sparking junk. Your job is to watch the corridor and give me a signal if anyone approaches. A simple bird call. Can you manage that? A bird call. He, Alex Vance, top of his class at the S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy of Technology, was being relegated to the role of a talking parakeet. Humiliation warred with the pragmatic realization that she was right. His methods were useless here. He was the liability. Fine, he ground out. I can manage a bird call. The library at night was a cathedral of shadows. Moonlight slanted through the high arched windows, catching motes of dust that danced in the still air. The silence was absolute, broken only by the whisper-soft rustle of turning pages from books that read themselves in the dark. Alex huddled behind a bookshelf, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. This was nothing like the simulations. The simulations didn't have the oppressive smell of old paper and binding glue, or the unnerving feeling that the thousands of books surrounding him were watching. He watched as a diminutive figure, a perfect replica of the tiny charms professor, Phileas Flitwick, scurried towards the grated entrance of the restricted section. Hermione, a master of disguise before she'd even hit puberty. She whispered the unlocking charm, and the gate swung open with a soft click. She slipped inside, melting into the deeper darkness within. Alex's job was simple. Watch. Listen. His senses felt dull, primitive without his usual suite of sensors. He had no thermal imaging, no audio enhancers, no motion detectors. He had only his own eyes and ears. He felt naked. Minutes stretched into an eternity. He strained his ears, listening for the telltale shuffle of a librarian's sensible shoes or the grumpy muttering of the castle's caretaker. Nothing. The silence was starting to get to him. In his world, silence meant his system was down. It was a sign of failure. Then he saw it. A faint, blue light pulsing from within the restricted section. It wasn't the warm yellow glow of a Lumos charm. It was cold, ethereal, and it pulsed with a steady, rhythmic beat. Like a heartbeat. His training screamed at him. Unidentified energy source. Potential trap. He abandoned his post, his orders to stay put forgotten. He crept to the gate, peering through the iron bars. Hermione was standing before a heavy, leather-bound tome that rested on a lectern. The book itself seemed to be the source of the light. Runes, etched into its cover in silver, were glowing with an intense cerulean light. "Hermione," he hissed, the name slipping out in a moment of panic. "Get away from it. It's a trap." She looked back at him, her face, Flitwick's face, a mask of intense concentration. "I know," she whispered back. "The binding is rigged. It's not a detection ward. It's a containment matrix. The moment I touch it, the entire section will seal." Alex's mind raced, processing the new data. A containment matrix. A magical quarantine. What's the trigger? Physical contact. But the runes are drawing power from the ambient magic in the room. They're getting stronger. I have to get the compass out before it becomes impenetrable. "Don't touch it." "That's an order," Alex commanded, his voice a harsh whisper. He saw the conflict in her eyes. The trained operative who should obey her handler, and the Gryffindor prodigy who was sure she could solve any problem. The Gryffindor one. "I can do it," she said, her small hands hovering over the glowing cover. "I just need to disrupt the energy flow for a fraction of a second." She reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the leather, the blue light exploded. A lattice of energy, bright as a magnesium flare, erupted from the book, instantly encasing the lectern in a crackling dome. Simultaneously, every rune in the room blazed to life. The iron gate behind Alex slammed shut with a deafening clang, and thick stone walls slid down from the ceiling, sealing the entrances to the library with a thunderous boom that shook the very foundations of the castle. They were locked in. Worse, they were not alone. The books on the shelves began to tremble. Pages fluttered as if in a hurricane, though the air was perfectly still. Spines cracked and covers tore, not from age, but from purpose. The books began to unravel, parchment and leather twisting and reforming into new, horrifying shapes. Tall, spindly figures made of bound vellum rose from the shelves, their inky printed words swirling across their bodies like moving tattoos. Their arms were sharpened quills, and their heads were open books, filled with silent, screaming text. Paper sentinels. An army made of forgotten lore. Hermione was trapped inside the energy dome, pounding on its crackling surface, her magical disguise melting away to reveal her own terrified face. Alex was outside the dome but inside the sealed room, armed with nothing but his wits and a briefcase full of useless electronics. One of the paper golems turned its featureless head towards him. It took a stiff, rustling step forward. Then another. From the deepest shadows of the restricted section, a voice echoed, smooth as silk and cold as the grave. It was a voice that held an accent Alex couldn't place, laced with ancient power and modern cruelty. "A S.H.I.E.L.D. analyst and the Black Widow's cub," the voice mused, a dark figure stepping out from behind a towering bookshelf. He was cloaked in black robes embroidered with a silver, serpentine knot, the symbol of the arcane hand. Lord Malachor was right. You muggles are so predictably persistent. The figure raised a hand, and the paper army stopped its advance, awaiting his command. He looked directly at Alex, his eyes glinting in the faint magical light. "Tell me, Mr. Vance," the man purred, a chilling smile spreading across his face. "Did your simulations prepare you for this?" Chapter 3. The Algorithm of Rubble. The air, thick with the dust of centuries, tasted like chalk and decay. Alex coughed, a dry, pathetic sound that was swallowed by the groaning death of the ancient bookshelf. Splintered wood and shredded parchment rained down around them, a blizzard of forgotten lore. His multi-spectrum visor, now flickering with a nauseating strobe effect, displayed nothing but a cascade of error messages. Ambient energy field exceeds sensor tolerance. Critical malfunction. Shutdown imminent. Get that ridiculous thing off your head, Vance. Hermione's voice cut through the haze, sharp and steady. She was already on her feet, wand held aloft, its tip glowing with a soft, steady light. Not a scratch on her. Her school robes were barely even dusty. "It's useless here." Alex ripped the visor off, hissing as a jolt of static electricity snapped from the frame to his fingers. He tossed the $2 million piece of S.H.I.E.L.D. hardware onto a pile of mangled books. It landed with a dull, plasticky thud. Useless. Every state-of-the-art diagnostic tool, every meticulously calibrated sensor in his kit was now little more than expensive junk. He felt naked, stripped of the digital senses he had relied on his entire life. It was an ancient pressure ward, Hermione explained, her eyes scanning the wreckage with a clinical detachment that was deeply unsettling in an 11-year-old. Tied to a rudimentary collapse charm. Old, but effective. Designed to trap thieves, not kill them. Messy but not lethal. Messy? Not lethal. Alex sputtered, his heart still jackhammering against his ribs. That entire shelf weighs at least 2 tons. My threat analysis software would have flagged this room as a death trap from 100 yards. And then you would have spent an hour trying to remotely disable it while the real prize was stolen from under your nose, she retorted, not unkindly, but with the weary patience of a master explaining the obvious to a slow apprentice. She prodded a fallen beam with the toe of her sensible black shoe. They wanted to slow us down. Distract us. Which means we're close. She was right, and the fact that she was right was infuriating. His entire methodology was built on caution, on analyzing every variable before taking a single step. Her approach, a legacy of Natasha Romanoff's brutal efficiency, was to kick the door down and deal with the consequences as they came. In this world, her way worked. He's got you buried under a pile of books. Okay, he said, taking a deep, dust-filled breath and trying to reassert some semblance of control. He was the handler. He was in charge. Okay, new plan. We fall back to the outpost, regroup with Croft, and reevaluate the intel. We don't know who set this trap or what else they have waiting for us. Hermione fixed him with a look. It was a stare he was beginning to recognize, a perfect alloy of her mother's piercing intensity and a child's unfiltered disappointment. Fall back? Agent Vance, the arcane hand isn't going to pause their plan while we reevaluate. They know we're here now. The race has already started. We just tripped at the starting line. Before he could argue, she pointed her wand at the wall behind the demolished bookshelf. Lumo Maxima. A brilliant, concentrated beam of light erupted from her wand, cutting through the gloom. Where the shelf had stood, the stone wall was not as uniform as it had first appeared. A faint, almost imperceptible outline of a door was etched into the rock, sealed shut with no visible handle or seam. In the center of the door, a single serpentine symbol was carved, and an H interwoven like a coiled snake. The arcane hand. Alex breathed, his training kicking in despite his panic. He'd seen the symbol in the mission briefing files. They weren't just slowing us down, Hermione said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They were sealing the path behind them. She ran her small hand over the cold stone. The ward that triggered the collapse was linked to this door. When their agent passed through, it activated the trap and sealed the entrance. Clever. Alex's mind, free from the distraction of his failing tech, began to work in a different way. He wasn't processing data streams. He was observing, analyzing the physical reality. It's a one-way street, he concluded. They didn't want anyone following them. They didn't count on anyone surviving their welcome mat, Hermione corrected. She tapped the serpentine symbol with her wand. It's magically sealed, of course. A standard imperturbable charm, probably reinforced. It could take me hours to dismantle it. We don't have hours, Alex said, the urgency of the situation finally overriding his fear. What's the alternative? The alternative, she said, a grim little smile touching her lips, is to find the magical hinge of the charm. A focal point where the energy is weakest. It's delicate work. She closed her eyes, placing her palm flat against the door. The air grew still. Alex watched, fascinated, as she muttered under her breath, a string of what sounded like nonsensical Latin. The light from her wand pulsed in time with her words. He felt useless again, a muggle bystander at a magic show. All he could do was stand guard, scanning the dark, ruined corners of the library annex with his own 2 eyes. That was when he heard it. Not a loud noise, but a subtle one. The soft scrape of a leather shoe on stone, coming from the corridor they'd just entered. His blood ran cold. Hermione, he whispered, his voice tight. She didn't open her eyes. I know. 2 of them. I felt their magical signatures cross the threshold. Her focus remained entirely on the door. Buy me 30 seconds. Buy you? With what? He hissed, his hand instinctively going to his hip for the standard-issue S.H.I.E.L.D. sidearm that Director Fury had expressly forbidden him from bringing. My witty personality? A strongly worded memo. Two figures emerged from the shadows at the far end of the room. They were tall and cloaked in dark gray robes that seemed to drink the light. Their faces were hidden by porcelain masks, unnervingly blank except for the same serpentine AH symbol painted over the right eye. They held wands of dark, gnarled wood, gripping them with the practiced ease of seasoned killers. Well, the one on the left said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that echoed in the ruined space. It seems the old castle's security measures are getting rusty. Look what's scurried in. The one on the right, taller and thinner, raised his wand. Malachor wants the girl. And the muggle. Unharmed if possible. Messy if necessary. Alex's mind went into overdrive. Threat assessment. 2 hostile mages. Unknown capabilities. Asset. 1 preteen witch. Currently occupied. Handler. 1 unarmored tech analyst with a broken flashlight and a failing heart monitor. The simulation odds were not good. Get behind me, he yelled at Hermione, pulling a heavy leather-bound tome from the wreckage and holding it up like a shield. It was a pathetic gesture, and he knew it. The gravelly-voiced wizard chuckled. Brave little muggle. What do you plan to do? Bore us to death with medieval literature. Hermione's eyes snapped open. Done, she whispered. She jabbed her wand at a point on the door, just left of the symbol. Finite incantatum. A crackle of blue energy shot from her wand and hit the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groan of grinding rock, the hidden door slid open, revealing a dark, narrow passage beyond. Go, she yelled, spinning to face the 2 wizards. Stupefy. A jet of red light blasted from her wand. The taller wizard deflected it with a lazy flick of his own, the spell splashing harmlessly against an invisible shield. Clever child, he sneered. Incarcerus. Thick ropes shot from his wand, flying through the air like angry snakes. Hermione dodged, nimble and quick, dropping into a crouch. Protego. A shimmering shield materialized in front of her just as the second wizard fired a volley of sickly yellow curses. The spell sizzled against her barrier. She was incredible. A tiny, ferocious whirlwind of controlled power. But she was outnumbered. Alex scrambled back, his mind racing, desperately searching for a solution. There was no algorithm for this, no program to run. It was just chaos, magic, and imminent danger. He fumbled in his jacket pockets, his fingers closing around the only piece of tech that still seemed to be working. His digital audio recorder, designed to capture and analyze sonic anomalies. Pointless. What was he going to do? Take notes on the sound a killing curse makes. Hermione blocked another spell, but was forced back a step. The 2 wizards were advancing, their movements synchronized, cutting off her angles of retreat. They were professionals. Depulso, Hermione shouted, and a pile of rubble flew towards the gravelly-voiced wizard. He disintegrated it with a contemptuous wave of his wand. Enough games, the taller one said. He began to chant in a low, guttural language Alex didn't recognize. The air grew cold, and the tip of his wand began to glow with a black, oily light. Hermione's shield flickered. That's dark magic, she grunted, her face pale with strain. I can't hold against that for long. Alex had to do something. Anything. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the details his panicked brain had previously ignored. The collapsed shelves. The scattered books. The high, vaulted stone ceiling. He looked up, tracing the lines of the heavy stone arches that supported the roof. Centuries old. Probably not up to any modern building code. His gaze locked onto the keystone in the arch, directly above the 2 wizards. It was an insane idea. A 1-in-a-million shot based on a half-remembered engineering lecture from his academy days. It was imprecise, dangerous, and could easily kill all of them, himself included. It was the only idea he had. Hermione. The archway, he yelled, his voice cracking. Can you hit the keystone? She spared him a fraction of a second's glance, her eyes widening as she understood. It was a testament to her tactical mind that she didn't question him. "I can't. My shield is tied to my wand. If I drop it to cast another spell, they'll..." The dark spell from the taller wizard slammed into her shield. It buckled violently, and she cried out, staggering back. The shield was failing. There was no other choice. It had to be him. Scrambling through the debris, Alex found what he was looking for, a length of fallen iron pipe from an old gas lamp fixture. It was heavy, unwieldy. He hefted it, his muscles screaming in protest. He was an analyst, not a weightlifter. "Hey," he shouted, his voice ridiculously high. "Hey, you masked freaks." The two wizards turned, their blank porcelain faces fixing on him. It was the opening Hermione needed. She dropped to one knee, pointing her wand at the floor. Glissio. The stone floor beneath the wizard's feet suddenly transformed into a smooth, frictionless slide. They yelped in surprise, arms pinwheeling as their feet shot out from under them. It was a brilliant, unexpected move that bought Alex the 2 seconds he needed. With a desperate roar, he hurled the iron pipe end over end towards the ceiling. It was a terrible throw. It wobbled in the air, spinning off axis. It was going to miss. For a horrifying second, Alex's heart seized in his chest. He had failed. But then, a flicker of gold light, no bigger than a firefly, shot from Hermione's wand. It zipped through the air and struck the pipe mid-flight, nudging it ever so slightly. A perfect, silent course correction. The end of the pipe struck the keystone with a sickening crack. For a moment, absolute silence reigned. The wizards, scrambling to their feet on the slick floor, looked up. Alex saw his own terror reflected in the blank eye holes of their masks. Then, with a low, grinding groan that vibrated through the very bones of the castle, the archway gave way. Dust and pebbles rained down, followed by huge, heavy blocks of stone. The wizards had no time to scream. They were simply swallowed by the avalanche, a cloud of gray dust billowing out from the point of impact. The entire section of the annex shook, and the roar was deafening. Alex threw himself to the ground, covering his head as smaller bits of debris pattered down around him. He felt a sharp tug on his jacket and was yanked backwards, skidding across the floor into the relative safety of the hidden passage. The heavy stone door slid shut behind them with a final booming thud, plunging them into absolute darkness and a sudden, ringing silence. He lay there on the cold, damp floor, gasping for air, his body trembling with adrenaline. He had faced down 2 rogue wizards. He had brought a ceiling down. He, Alex Vance, the man who once filed a formal complaint about the excessive speed of the S.H.I.E.L.D. cafeteria's toaster slots, had survived a real-life firefight. Or magic fight. Whatever. A small point of light appeared, Hermione's wand. Her face was illuminated in its soft glow. She was pale and breathing hard, a thin trickle of blood running from a cut on her forehead where a piece of shrapnel had grazed her. She looked at him. Her gaze was different now. The condescension was gone. The annoyance was gone. In their place was something else, something he hadn't seen before. It wasn't quite gratitude, and it certainly wasn't admiration. It was a stark, grudging acknowledgement. A sliver of respect. That, she said, her voice a little shaky, was the most reckless, idiotic, and structurally unsound plan I have ever witnessed. Alex managed a weak, trembling smile. It worked, didn't it? Barely, she conceded. She pushed herself into a sitting position, wincing. You could have brought the whole wing down on top of us. Calculated risk, he lied, his heart still trying to beat its way out of his chest. Hermione didn't reply. Her attention was drawn to something on the floor near where the taller wizard had fallen. The stone door had slammed shut just as the ceiling collapsed, and in the chaos, something must have been knocked through the opening. She reached down and picked it up. It was a small, circular device about the size of a pocket watch. It was made of a strange, dark metal that seemed to hum with a low energy, cool to the touch. Inlaid on its surface were delicate silver wires that looked for all the world like a printed circuit board, but they pulsed with a faint, magical light. In the center was a small, milky white crystal. It was a fusion of 2 worlds, an impossible marriage of intricate technology and raw magic. What is that? Alex asked, crawling closer. Hermione turned it over in her palm. I don't know, she admitted, her brow furrowed in concentration. I've never seen anything like it. It feels wrong. The magic is fighting with the metal. As she spoke, the crystal in the center flared with a brief, intense pulse of green light. A faint, ghostly image flickered into existence in the air above it for less than a second, a complex star chart, overlaid with what looked like a topographical map of the Scottish Highlands. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. The device went dark and inert in her hand. They stared at it, the silence of the dark passage pressing in on them. They had survived. They had found a clue, but they had stumbled into something far more complex than a simple recovery mission. The arcane hand wasn't just using magic. They were twisting it, combining it with forbidden knowledge from another world. Alex looked from the strange device to Hermione's determined face. His gadgets were gone, his protocols were useless, and his partner was a child spy who could level a room with a Latin phrase. He was completely, utterly out of his depth. And for the first time, he realized that getting back to his quiet desk at S.H.I.E.L.D. was no longer the most important thing. The most important thing was figuring out what that map meant and stopping whatever Lord Malachor had planned, no matter the cost. Chapter 4. The Alchemist's Gambit. The echo of the collapsing corridor was still ringing in Alex's ears, a low, grinding thrum that vibrated through the soles of his standard-issue S.H.I.E.L.D. boots. Dust, thick with the scent of ancient stone and burnt spellfire, coated his tongue. He coughed, a dry, pathetic sound in the sudden stillness of the secret passage. Beside him, Hermione stood ramrod straight, her breathing controlled, wand held at a low ready. The tip still glowed with a faint, defiant light. She hadn't said a word since he'd shoved her out of the way of the scything curse, taking the brunt of the secondary blast himself. The impact had thrown him against the wall, rattling his teeth and leaving a spectacular, purple-black bruise blooming across his ribs. It was the most physically jarring experience of his life, and it had lasted all of 3 seconds. "Report," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. It was the tone of an operative, not a first-year student. Alex pushed himself upright, wincing as his abused muscles protested. "Hostiles neutralized. I think. You." Superficial burns on my left forearm. "Spell work is unimpeded." She finally looked at him, her chestnut eyes scanning him with an unnervingly clinical gaze. "You're injured." "It's a bruise," he grunted, trying to sound tougher than he felt. "Standard field hazard, I'm sure." A flicker of something, was it amusement, crossed her face before being ruthlessly suppressed. "You were effective." The ricochet strategy with the levitation charm and the discarded shield was tactically sound, if unorthodox. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had ever given him. Alex felt a ridiculous surge of pride. "I read about it in a field manual. Improvised use of environmental assets. Section C, paragraph 4. He'd made that up, but it sounded plausible. Hermione's eyebrow twitched. "There is no such paragraph. You panicked creatively." "Right. That." He brushed dust from his jacket, the familiar fabric a small comfort in this insane, magical labyrinth. "So what now?" "They were a diversion. Malachor is after the Ethereum compass, and that trap was meant to slow us down or kill us. Which means he must be close to it." "He is," Hermione said, her focus already shifting away from him and back to the mission. She ran a hand along the stone wall, her brow furrowed in concentration. The magical signature from the trap wasn't just defensive. It was a resonance key. By triggering it, we've pinpointed the compass's location for anyone sensitive enough to feel the echo. Alex's blood ran cold. "We led him right to it?" "We confirmed its location for him," she corrected, a sharp edge to her voice. "He was already in the vicinity. The arcane hand has been smuggling artifacts out of this castle for months. They know its secrets. My mother's intelligence suggested the final repository was linked to celestial alignments. They were waiting for the right moment." Alex's analyst brain, the only part of him that felt truly competent, kicked into gear. An alignment? When? He glanced at his wrist, at the stark, functional face of his S.H.I.E.L.D-issued analog watch. It was one of the few pieces of tech that still worked, its simple quartz movement immune to the castle's ambient magic. "Time is 21:47. Hermione closed her eyes, tilting her head as if listening to a sound he couldn't hear. The auric convergence. It happens once a decade, when Jupiter and Saturn are in perfect opposition as viewed from the highest point of the castle. The magical tides are at their peak, weakening ancient wards. It creates a window. She opened her eyes, and they were wide with urgency. The highest point. The astronomy tower. How long is the window? Alex asked, already moving. His ribs screamed in protest, but he ignored them. 12 minutes, she said, breaking into a run. It started 3 minutes ago. They sprinted through the winding passages, a bizarre duo of the old world and the new. Hermione moved with a fluid grace, her wand a natural extension of her arm, while Alex lumbered behind, his movements dictated by training simulations, not reality. He fumbled in his jacket pocket, his fingers closing around the last of his non-electronic gear, a small, dense magnesium pellet designed for emergency signaling. It was a glorified fire starter, but it was something. They burst out of a tapestry depicting a particularly gruesome troll hunt and into a familiar spiral staircase. The air grew colder, thinner, carrying the scent of the night sky. At the top of the stairs, a heavy oak door stood slightly ajar. Muted, deep chanting leaked from within. "He's performing the attunement ritual," Hermione whispered, her face pale in the moonlight streaming through a high window. "Once it's complete, the compass will be bonded to him. We have to interrupt him now." Alex took a deep breath, the air burning his lungs. This was it. No simulations, no do-overs. "Okay, plan. I create a distraction. You go for the artifact." She gave him a look that clearly communicated her opinion of his chances. He is one of the most powerful wizards of his generation. Your distraction will last approximately 4 seconds before you're turned into a garden gnome. "Then we need a better distraction," Alex shot back, his mind racing. He peered through the crack in the door. The top of the astronomy tower was a vast, circular room. In the center, a towering, intricate brass model of the solar system, an orrery, spun slowly, its metal planets glinting. Before it, on a stone dais, floated a device that looked like a cross between a compass and a Faberge egg. It was the Ethereum compass, glowing with a soft, golden light. Lord Malachor stood before it, his back to them, arms raised. 2 other figures in the dark robes of the arcane hand flanked him, wands out, guarding their master. The chanting was a low, resonant hum that made the very stones vibrate. "Okay, new plan," Alex whispered, pulling back. "A loud, bright, disorienting event. You know a spell for that. A full-body bind curse coupled with a blinding hex might work, but his wards are too strong. I'd never get a clean shot. No, I mean loud and bright in the muggle sense." He held up the small magnesium pellet. "This is refined magnesium. If you hit it with a precise amount of heat, not enough to detonate, just enough to ignite, it will burn at 3,000 degrees. The light will be blinding." Hermione stared at the pellet, then at him. A slow, calculating gleam entered her eyes. A photochemical reaction. The sudden, intense light would overwhelm the optical nerves. It would bypass most standard shielding charms, which are designed to deflect magical light, not mundane. Exactly. It's a magical blind spot. Can you do it? A small, controlled flame spell. "Lacarnum inflammary," she breathed. A minor charm for setting cloaks alight. The precision would be difficult under pressure. "You can do it," Alex said, with a certainty that surprised even himself. "On my signal. I'll throw it to the center of the room. When it goes off, you don't go for the compass. You take out his guards. I'll handle the compass." She opened her mouth to argue, to tell him he was a liability, that he should stay back. But she paused, studying his face in the dim light. She saw the fear there, yes, but it was overshadowed by a hard, determined set to his jaw. He wasn't the same man she'd met in Hogsmeade. He was still a desk jockey, but he was a desk jockey who was learning to improvise on the fly. "On your signal," she agreed, nodding once. Alex's heart hammered against his bruised ribs. He gave her a sharp nod, then kicked the door open with all his strength. "S.H.I.E.L.D, he yelled, the word feeling absurd on his tongue. "Drop the artifact and put your sticks on the ground." Malachor and his acolytes spun around. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Malachor was tall and imperious, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes that glittered with cold intelligence. He looked at Alex's rumpled jacket and practical boots with utter contempt. "A muggle," he said, his voice a silken, dangerous baritone. "How quaint. You've brought a pet, Miss Granger." "He's not my pet," Hermione snapped, stepping into the room, wand raised. "No matter." Malachor smiled, a chilling, humorless expression. "The magical world has no place for your kind, little man. You are a relic, a footnote in a history that is about to be rewritten." "History's written by the winners, pal," Alex retorted, his hand tightening around the magnesium pellet. "And your subscription is about to be cancelled." "Now." He lobbed the pellet in a high arc towards the center of the room. As it reached its apex, Hermione's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "Lacarnum inflammary." A tiny jet of blue-white flame shot from her wand, striking the pellet midair. The world dissolved into pure, searing white light. It was more intense than Alex could have ever imagined. A silent, instantaneous explosion of brilliance that bleached all color and shadow from existence. He heard cries of pain and surprise, his own eyes squeezed shut against the glare. As planned, he had looked away at the last second, but the afterimage was still burned onto his retinas. He forced his eyes open, blinking through the purple spots dancing in his vision. The two arcane hand wizards were staggering, clutching their faces. Hermione was already moving. "Stupefy," she yelled, a jet of red light hitting the first guard square in the chest. He crumpled. Incarcerus. Ropes erupted from her wand and wrapped tightly around the second, who fell to the ground, bound and struggling. It was brutally efficient. Alex didn't have time to be impressed. He charged forward, his target the dais. Malachor was on one knee, shaking his head, one hand covering his eyes. The flash had caught him off guard, but he was already recovering, his powerful magic fighting off the effects. "Insolent worm," he roared, raising his wand without looking. A bolt of sickly green energy shot past Alex's head, so close he felt the static of its passage. It struck the great brass orrery, which groaned and buckled, a planet shearing off and clattering to the floor. Alex dove, rolling behind a dais as another curse shattered the stone where he'd just been. His heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of his chest. This was real. That green light hadn't been a stunner. "Hermione, a little help here," he yelled, peeking over the edge of the stone. "I'm occupied," she shouted back. Her shield charm, a shimmering blue dome, flared as Malachor, now on his feet and his eyes blazing with fury, hammered it with a relentless barrage of spells. The air cracked with percussive blasts of power. Alex knew this was his only chance. While Malachor was focused on breaking Hermione's shield, the compass was unguarded. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Don't think. Act." He vaulted over the dais, his hands closing around the cool, intricate metal of the Ethereum compass. The moment his skin touched it, a jolt of energy shot up his arms, pure and overwhelming. It wasn't electricity. It was something else. It was the feeling of standing on a mountain peak in a lightning storm, the taste of ozone, the hum of a planet's worth of power flowing through him. The world seemed to expand and contract in a single, dizzying instant. He saw not just the room, but the ley lines of magic crisscrossing the castle, the deep well of power sleeping beneath the black lake, the faint, shimmering aura of every living thing. He gasped, stumbling back, clutching the artifact to his chest. The needle on its face, a sliver of what looked like spun moonlight, was spinning wildly. The sudden surge of power distracted Malachor. He turned, his face a mask of fury, seeing the muggle holding his prize. "You defile it with your touch." He raised his wand for a final, killing curse. But in that split second of distraction, Hermione had acted. "De primo," she screamed. It wasn't a spell aimed at Malachor, but at the floor beneath him. With a deafening crack, a section of the stone floor imploded, blasting downward. Malachor cried out in shock as the ground vanished from under him, and he fell. With a final snarl of rage, he twisted in midair and vanished with the sharp crack of apparition. Silence descended, broken only by the groan of the damaged orrery and the ragged sound of their breathing. Alex stared at the hole in the floor, then down at the compass in his hands. He'd done it. He had actually done it. He hadn't just survived. He had secured the asset. "Are you all right?" Hermione asked, rushing over. Her shield had vanished, and she looked exhausted, her face smudged with soot, but her eyes were bright with adrenaline. "I think so," Alex said, his voice hoarse. He held up the compass. Mission accomplished. For the first time, a genuine, unguarded smile touched her lips. Not bad for a walking instruction manual. Alex felt a grin spread across his own face. "You too offer a kid." Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl, but there was no heat in it. She looked at the compass in his hands. The needle had stopped spinning wildly. It was now tracing a slow, deliberate pattern, sweeping across the dial in a series of complex arcs before twitching back to repeat the sequence. "It's beautiful," Alex murmured, tracing the filigree on its golden shell. "The craftsmanship is incredible." "It's more than just a machine," Hermione said, leaning closer. Her brow furrowed. "The pattern the needle is making, it isn't random. It's tracing constellations." Alex's analytical mind took over. He watched the needle's path, tracking the points, angles, and curves. "Not any constellations I know. And I minored in astrophysics." "Because they aren't visible anymore," Hermione said softly, a note of dawning horror in her voice. "These are the Noxui Obscuri, the shadow constellations. They were mapped by ancient wizards who could see magical energy, not just starlight. They were believed to mark the locations of great nexuses." Alex looked closer at the compass. The pattern was intricate, but it was repeating. A map. Malachor didn't just want a compass. He wanted a map. As he watched, he noticed something else. Etched into the base of the compass, almost invisible unless the light caught it just right, was a sigil. A stylized serpent coiled around a broken wand. "Hermione," he said, his voice low. "What's the symbol?" She peered at it, and all the color drained from her face. That's impossible. That's the crest of the House of Malachor, an ancient, disgraced line of alchemists who believed in forcibly merging magical and mundane energies. They were exiled centuries ago. The pieces clicked into place in Alex's mind with a sickening finality. He wasn't trying to steal a random artifact. This belonged to his family. He needed it to unlock his birthright. The compass in his hands suddenly felt infinitely heavier. The needle completed another sequence, and for a split second, it held steady, pointing due west. Then it began tracing again. "The pattern," Alex said, his eyes wide. "It's not just magical nexuses. Look at the coordinates it's implying." He was mentally overlaying the star chart with a terrestrial map, a skill honed over thousands of hours in the S.H.I.E.L.D. data labs. The points were terrifyingly specific. The Black Lake at Hogwarts. A standing stone circle in the Orkney Islands. A decommissioned Roxanne power plant in upstate New York. A S.H.I.E.L.D. communications array deep in the Nevada desert. Hermione followed his logic, her quick mind grasping the horrifying implication. They had believed Malachor wanted to use the compass to find sources of power to hoard for himself. They were wrong. The scope of his ambition was so much greater. "He's not just finding power sources," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. "He's creating a circuit." Hermione's face was a pale mask in the moonlight, her eyes reflecting the terrible, intricate dance of the needle. "He's drawing a battle map," she finished, her voice trembling for the first time. "And he's about to connect the two worlds."